شباب قصف قصف يا شباب خذونا على الهواء.
Yeah, that's a reporter on the air at the very moment. Powerful airstrikes hit the Syrian capital of Damascus today. Israel launched those airstrikes aimed at, they say, stopping violence against civilians in the country's southern region. The strikes hit Syria's military headquarters and landed right near the presidential palace. Syria's state media reporting at this hour at least one person died, 18 others injured in that attack. This is, if you're keeping track, the second day of airstrikes on Syria as Israel vows to destroy forces attacking Druze communities in southern Syria near Israel's border. In fact, you could see the smoke rising from the Syrian capital, where reports say strikes also hit the presidential palace. Syria's state media reports at least one person died and so many others injured in those strikes. Well, Syria's defense minister announced a ceasefire in the fighting following government forces moving into that key city where sectarian violence has killed dozens. Secretary of State Marco Rubio released this statement today on the strikes in Syria. He said, "We are very worried about the violence in southern Syria." He goes on to say it's a direct threat to efforts to help build a peaceful and stable Syria. "We have been and remain in repeated and constant talks with the governments of Syria and Israel on this matter." So let's bring in CBS News Middle East reporter Courtney Kealy. Courtney, good to have you with us, my friend. Could Israel's move on Syria escalate conflicts in that region?
Well, that is the worry, but we're looking at a ceasefire now, a tenuous one between the Druze and the Syrian government. And that is significant because two top religious leaders that represent the Druze community did say we do not seek external protection, especially from Israel. So this could be an overreach by Israel. This could drive the Druze into some sort of agreement with the Syrian government so they can leave peacefully. And you've got to understand that the Druze are this ancient sect that broke off in the 10th century. And there's a huge Druze community in Lebanon, in the Golan, and in Sueda. I've been through all of them. Very traditional according to a very secretive kind of religious Druze community. So they've always been their own independent community, trying to live in peace. And with the Syrian government being more Sunni and only having one Druze member of parliament in there right now, member of the government, this is all tenuous as Syria is trying to right itself after 14 years of civil war. So when Israel Katz, the Israeli defense minister, says live, the painful blows have started on Syria, and you're looking at more airstrikes by the Israelis in another sovereign country, this will not be looked at as welcome, except that the Druze and the government of Syria right now need to really come to some, not just a ceasefire, but some semblance of trust, and it's just not there yet.
All right, so let's put a pin in that part of the world. Speaking of Syria and Israel, and now look on the map at Hamas and Israel. There are some reports out there that a ceasefire, at least talks about a ceasefire, could be on the brink of collapse. What are you hearing on that front?
Well, you've always got to look at the coalitions, and Netanyahu's coalition, one key part of it just left, and he has to really now appease some of the much more far-right members that aren't interested in necessarily an end to the war, and that's what Hamas wants. So things change on the ground pretty quickly, not even necessarily in a kind of bloodletting, people dying. It's also just the politics of Netanyahu's coalition and what Hamas will do, and also whether there's even a united Palestinian front from West Bank to Gaza. So it's always a sticky wicket, as the Brits say. Last week, President Trump was really pushing for it. He seems to have kind of switched a little bit of his attention right now. And, as we saw, he was hosting the Bahrain leader, and that's an affiliate of Saudi Arabia. So he's really doing some output today, more on his Abraham Accords and less on Gaza.
All right, so we've talked about Syria, we've talked about Gaza and their connections to Israel, especially with the headlines recently. Also, another place, Iran, also connected to Israel in the headlines. President Trump today said he's in no rush to talk to Iran after last month's airstrikes on their nuclear facilities. What are you hearing from Iran and that region on where things stand there?
Well, the supreme leader of Iran, the Ayatollah Khamenei, has spoken out today, and he said Iran accomplished a great feat in the recent war against Israel. So you can pretty much interpret that as a big propaganda comment trying to say that Iran is victorious and Iran has survived this. Now they definitely have intense infrastructure problems, and they had deaths, and they have the capital city reeling from those 12 days of war and airstrikes. But definitely the Ayatollah is signaling and flexing his own power, and that would be the regime. Now President Trump can change. He does speak off the cuff, and we just usually wait to hear what he says next. But today it's the focus on Bahrain, which in turn is focused on Saudi Arabia, because they really are the power in Bahrain. It's almost a proxy relationship, and that would be more of Abraham Accords. But Iran is still flexing, the regime is still in charge, and both and Israel is also saying where they reserve the right to do whatever they want. Essentially, Trump gave them a green light in case there's rebuilding of nuclear and ballistic missiles. Israel talks about both because they were just under fire from those ballistic missiles.
Courtney Kealy, thank you so much. It's always great to have your expertise watching that entire region. Thank you so much.